that I hadn't thought before. Or, if you feel real shy, you can just point at somebody and go, they said something really good, and then they have to talk. So, let's do it. We just give a couple minutes, we'll do it. Okay, 2 fingers are pointing at you. Yes, you already. So stand up. In fact, come up here. Because he's putting this on Facebook for the world to see. So come on here.
Lucky you look good.
What I really liked, I'm supposed to talk about what I liked or what about we.
What you like?
Yeah, what I liked is I found it really interesting that you could be so considerate of people and just a little like difference you could make could build a church. I really was impressed with if we started at 8. And I was thinking about the fact that this person would have had to be going to church just twice a year. But just that 1 hour difference enabled this person to come, prayed for 5, got 8, and then now 9. That is amazing. So for me, I'm thinking, these are the things we need to do. Just the little things that we can do if we allow God. It just takes me back to what he said in Zechariah. Don't despise them, don't make light of them. Just be happy and love what God is doing with you. So that's what really impressed me.
Thank you. Thank you. Somebody else. Come on up. No, come up here because he wants. Come on, stand up here and be pretty. But the next one is going to be a man, so you guys get ready.
In line with what my sister said, I just remembered my late mom. She used to be a Foursquare member, and when she wasn't able to go to church, the church came to her house. She had people who came every Sunday to have church with her. So I just remember that name.
That's really good, huh? My wife grew up in Echo Park. She was dedicated to the Lord as a baby in Angela's Temple. She actually went to Amy Summer McPherson's funeral in her mother's stomach. Her parents were both deaf, and so they didn't make very good money. Her dad worked 2 40-hour-a-week jobs and died at age 43 from overwork. The Foursquare Church, they moved to a small community. There was a Foursquare church there, delivered groceries to her family. These things count. These things count. They seem small, they seem insignificant, but they count. Okay, one more, it's got to be a man. They're all pointing at you.
I don't know why they pointed, but I'll have something to say. Well, I was just saying to them that the smaller the church, the easier it is to reach communities. And when the churches are big, we can't really reach out to communities that were cities. And people have to travel. Adam was saying, you travel very long distance just to go to church. And you don't really know the community in which the church is situated. And the smaller the church, the more we can impact community.
That's true. Well, and that's just a natural thing. The smaller the church, the more you tend to be connected to the community. Have you ever done anything like this? I learned something. There's something I did a long time ago. I'm going to tell you about it. Yeah, I agree. Hey, and you know what? It's okay. Don't worry about him. When we get to the point that we can't have babies in our churches, we got us a problem. We got to be able to. Jesus said, "Suffer the little children to come to me," and so it's no problem. But when I was starting out as a pastor, I was 25 years old. And we had almost no money, and we kind of lived out of our own savings. We were of the mind that if you had a job, plus being a pastor, if you were bivocational, you were a failure. That's what we were taught in Bible college at that time. And so I just do anything to not have to go get a job, because as soon as I would go get a job, then I would quit the church. That was just kind of the way Foursquare was in those days. And so we went and we made this little flyer thing. We call it Waves of Faith. We were in a beach town, so it was Waves of Faith. and it looked like a church newsletter, but it really was a story always of somebody who got saved and their life got changed. So it was really evangelism, but we made it look like a church newsletter. And I started going and knocking doors and trying to give them to people, and they didn't like me. Wouldn't take it. So then I started just going around, and I just kind of crease it, and I'd wedge it into their front door, or I'd stick it where the doorknob was. You know, it's different. In England you couldn't do this, but the doorknobs in America are close to the jamb, so I just roll it up and stick it in there. And, you know, we had a number of people come to church because I did that. Some of them, when I'd go to put it on their door, they'd open the door and talk to me. We ended up getting 7 pastors out of that initial group of people that did that. Well, I've heard about some people now in America, and they use direct mail. We could not have afforded direct mail, and you probably can't. But you could afford to print something, and you could put your running shoes on and go door to door and just leave them. But if you tie the thing to a website, especially if you're able to put the sermon up on the website, they can read the thing, and then they can spy on you. And they can decide do they want to come to that church or not. And it becomes an effective tool. But you do have a natural tendency when you're smaller to be plugged into the neighborhood. And when you're larger, you become a freeway church. And you just, you know, that's not a bad thing. It's just a different thing. And so we need to appreciate what we have. So you in a small church, you have a strong congregational identity. The people generally know the history of their own church. It's easier to talk about it because there's not so many million things to talk about. And so that's there. Hopefully, members better understand the basic vision, values, and goals of the church. I wish that we had time that we could do this. And we don't have time, and it would be embarrassing if we did it, so we won't do it. But I wish I could get you to do this. I'm going to give you 5 minutes, and I want you to write down your vision. What is it in 1 sentence? I want you to write down the 3 most important values in your church, and I want you to write down 3 things that you hope to have accomplished in 20 years. And like I said, we don't have time for it. And what I also said was we would probably be embarrassed because most of us couldn't do that. And yet, it's probably true that if we talked for an hour about it, it would come spilling out. Am I making sense when I say that? That your people might be able to put it on paper faster than you could. One of the things that I want to work with tomorrow is that we get to a point where we do put it on paper and we do put it out for the people so they really understand what we're all about. And because it causes people, if they have a strong sense of vision and of goals, to coalesce around those things, and good things are going to happen as a result. Traditions are more important to the hearts of the members of a smaller church. You know, when we were small, we started a thing. Our church is called Hope Chapel. And when the last church I pastored was small, we started a tradition we called Team Hope. And we would have a picnic every year, church picnic, you know. And in America, that's like, people don't do church picnics. That's what they did in the 1800s, you know. Now we rent huge arenas and we do, you know, and so the people would scoff at church picnics. So we started having a church picnic. And then we came up with this idea that anybody who does any ministry in the church is part of Team Hope. The rest of the people are attenders. And in our church, because they started as hippies, right? The Foursquare denomination bylaws has a whole thing about membership and all that. But, you know, hey man, that's not cool. We just don't do that. That's not groovy, you know? And I got in trouble one time for counting how many people came to church. I mean, you had to fill out a report for the denomination, so you had to count. But one of the hippie guys caught me counting. I was actually standing in the back of the room doing this. What are you doing? And I told him, and he got mad at me. It's like, hey, you know, we're not into that. And so, you know, we haven't even known how many churches we planted until about 6-8 months ago. Somebody started asking me, and they were pressing me, and I had to find out. But so you've got this thing about traditions, and so we don't have a signed membership book. We just figure if you come here all the time, you're one of us. And that's what we tell people. But we made a distinction between Team Hope, that's the people who run the church, and the attenders. That's the people who sit and watch. Am I making sense?
Yes.
So at the picnic, we worked so hard. One of the hardest jobs in our church is to make sure that we included on the list every single person that is doing any significant ministry in the church. And they may be 12 years old. But if they're doing something to serve the Lord, we want to honor them. And so the church buys a t-shirt that says Team Hope on it. And every year we change the logo and all that. And so at the picnic, we give the shirts out to everybody who deserves a shirt. And myself and key leaders will stand at the table, and as people are coming in, we run up and hand them the shirt. As the church got larger, I found myself going, what's her name? What's her name? What's her name? And then somebody at the table would know their name, and I'd run up and I'd go, oh, Josh, thank you for what you've done, you know. But 2 minutes ago, I'm going, what's his name? What's he do? In a big church, it's that way. But here's the other problem. As the church got larger and larger, a smaller and smaller percentage of people came to the picnic. And when I handed the church off to the next generation, they discontinued the whole practice altogether. But they changed their name. They changed the name of the church because they want to start a new movement. I think that's a really cool thing. It's a good thing for a movement to birth a movement. But that allowed me, without looking offensive to them, because I didn't want to look like, well, you threw away Team Hope, so I'm going to do it. But now they changed the name, so now we started the Team Hope thing again, and we're right in the process of doing it for the first time. We're 3 years old, and we're just now getting around to it. But in a small church, those things like a church picnic, a t-shirt, that shirt was like gold, and we kept it that way. After we gave them out, we would throw the rest away. We'll make shirts that say the name of our church on them, and if we got leftovers from them, we make one every year. You could buy it. Those go on. We're doing a mission in Kenya. We take those shirts to Kenya. But the Team Hope shirts, they go in the trash. Nobody is going to get a Team Hope shirt that didn't earn one, because it's an important issue that you are serving the Lord in our church, and we want to build that tradition into the church. So loyalty is kind of really natural in a small church. In a small church, you're there because you like what's going on, you like the leaders. In a large church, you're maybe just there hanging out because your friends are there. We've actually had to deal with people when our church got larger that were guys that were coming to church just because they wanted to pick up on girls, and they'd tell you that. They wouldn't hide it. They'd just come out and say it. I'm not a Christian. I just come here because there's girls. One guy said, the reason that I come here is these girls are so naive that they're an easy mark. Sad. There's a family feeling. Whoa. Okay. I bought a 7-year-old computer and tried to update it. I put new RAM in it and whatever because it's lightweight and it travels easy. And this is the first time I've used it and it doesn't work. So, but I understand it. I know how to work on it. So 1 Timothy 5, first 2 verses say, never speak harshly to an older man, but appeal to him respectfully as you would to your own father. Talk to the younger men as you would to your own brothers. Treat older women as you would your mother, and treat younger women with all purity as you would your own sisters. Now, Paul's talking to Timothy, who's a young pastor, and he's saying, treat the people in your church like your family. That's a little hard to do when there's 10,000 people in church. I never tried that, but I've tried to do it with 2,000 people in church, and I'm going, what's her name? What's her name? You can't do it. In a small church, it's very easy to be family. So small churches have a feeling of family that large churches can't often duplicate. And now, notice I said can't often duplicate it. because there is one thing that we've done, and we'll talk about this tomorrow, but we do a thing we call mini church, and that's home groups that meet together to talk about what the Holy Spirit said while the pastor was talking on the weekend. And what we've done is we've really created small churches within the large church. And we call the leaders of the home group, some of them don't like it, but we call them pastors. And we will actually go get the paperwork done so they can do weddings. And we encourage them to do funerals, to do baby dedications, to baptize people in bathtubs and swimming pools. All the things that traditionally the senior pastor does that. We want to put it out to where people are pastoring, 5 people or 12 people inside of a congregation, now 300. In our church, there's 300 people. We're at the point where it's hard to be thinking as a small church anymore, and I'm not real happy about that. I went from pastoring about 2,300 people to pastoring 150 people, and then now it's grown. And it was so good when it was 150. We have food every Sunday. In between services, but when we started out, nobody ever asked anybody to bring food. Food just appeared. It just showed up. Now, somebody goes to Costco every week and buys the food. I don't like that. I liked it much better when the food was just appearing because people had generosity in their heart and took it upon themselves. But as it got so big, I think what happened was, well, I can't make food for everybody, so I won't make food at all. And so we go to Costco. And so, again, there's value in this family feeling that is hard to duplicate, but you can do it. If I was starting a church all over today from scratch, if I started and 12 people showed up, I would instantly try to have 2 home groups meeting. Our church of 300 has 28 home groups meeting. It's like almost 1 for 10 people. Now, some of them only have 4 people in them. We're in an inner city area, and so most of ours, we call them home groups, but they don't meet in homes. They meet at McDonald's. They meet in some of them in Starbucks. Some of them meet in parks. There's one that meets in a garage where they fix cars, and they meet there after hours. We just do whatever we can to try to keep people close together in this thing. And I think the reason that we're growing is the home groups more than it is my fancy preaching or whatever they're coming to hear on the weekend. It's that family feeling. So everyone knows everyone else by name, and they know their history. You in a small church, you get to know each other well enough that you know that. The pastor actually knows the members and at least knows their names. In a large church, you probably would only know a few people. I mean, could you imagine? I'll name the pastor on this one because I like him. Joel Osteen.
Yeah.
40,000 people. Can you imagine Joel Osteen knowing the names of 40,000 people? Nobody could do that. But if you're pastoring 40 people, well, if there's 2 that you don't know, there's something wrong. I once, look at this last line, this happened to me. I once greeted a 4-year member. They've been in our church for 4 years. And I asked them, is this your first day with us? And to my embarrassment, that was a few years ago, I was pastoring a big church. But to my embarrassment, in the last month, twice I've asked people, is this your first day? Oh no, I've been coming here for 3 months. And one person said, I've been coming here for 4 months. And I hadn't even met them. And I stand at a door where pretty much they got to walk by me to get out. And what happens, and is it okay if I just wander around a bit and talk about silly things? I pastored in California for 12 years. And I was the 30th pastor to leave that church to go plant a new church when I moved to Hawaii. I didn't want to move to Hawaii. The Lord sent me there. Everybody goes, oh yeah, you. I don't like it. I like California. The weather is wonderful in California. If you want to pray that God will call you someplace besides rainy old England, pray for Southern California. But as I was leaving the church, the guy that I handed off to was kind of coming up, And so, remember the story of how Absalom tried to take the hearts of the people away from David? And so he would stand where the people came in and went out. So this guy's name was Zach. And so we had a building where you had to walk up these stairs to get into church. And there were big wide stairs. It used to be a bowling alley. And so I made Zach stand at the top of the stairs. I go, you're going to be Absalom. I go, you're going to become their pastor. And so I'm going to go hide after church so that people can't talk to me. And they'll be forced to talk to you. But I want you to stand at the top of the stairs while they're coming to church, which means the worship's going on inside, and he's standing out there. And while they're leaving church, you stand out there. And then, everything went well, and I left and everything. And I went back a year later, and he wasn't standing at the top of the stairs anymore. There was a double doors thing, and he was standing in the doorway. And it's like the door, the wall's right here, and it's right here. And he's standing with his back to the wall. And I go, why'd you move from there? It's like from that wall to right here. Why'd you move that? What'd you do that for? And he goes, well, it's because if they try to stop and talk to me for 5 minutes, they're in the doorway and they feel uncomfortable, so they just keep on going. And he goes, that way I get to shake everybody's hand, and I want to shake everybody's hand. And then he told me a trick he did. Stand up. He goes, when I grab their hand, and I go, how are you? Now, he didn't do it that fast, but he would just put gentle pressure on them and kind of move them right on by so you could grab hold of the next person. But this actually did happen to me where I greeted somebody who had been in the church for 4 years, and I thought it was their first Sunday, and I was embarrassed by that. So let's see if I can get this thing to work again. An informal atmosphere. You may not like the way that I do things. You may not like the way that I'm doing this thing right now, because you may be used to people coming and they got a very polished presentation and they got it down pat. I just can't be that kind of person. The way I was when I was a kid, God had chosen the right person to pastor a bunch of hippies. I just didn't know it. I got brainwashed in Bible college where I wasn't allowed to wear Levi's because that was somehow sinful. And we got caught playing catch with a baseball on Sunday, and we were told it's the Sabbath and you're violating the Sabbath. And inside of me, something rebelled. And I actually went to the president of the college and said, this idiot teacher you got over here did this to us. And they changed the rules. We got to play catch with a baseball on Sunday. We never did get to wear Levi's. And, but I just can't do the polished thing. I don't want to be a polished teacher. I'm a Bible teacher. I just generally just go through the Bible chapter by chapter and verse by verse, and we just kind of talk our way through it. My goal is that the people in the church would end up knowing the Bible as well as I know the Bible, rather than that I would produce a bunch of really good sermons that would get them all fired up about stuff. I want them to be able to talk to their next door neighbor about Jesus as well as I can talk to their neighbor about Jesus and answer those kind of questions. And so there's a sort of an informality that happens, and it just naturally happens in a small church. You know, I just noticed the man with the baby walked out. He probably felt embarrassed. That should not happen. It should not happen. There he is. And there's a little guy, and he's jumping up and down and talking, and that's what should happen. And we need to be that way, and we need to be that way when we're big. You know, when we were a church of about 1,200 people in the last church I was in 10, 15 years ago, and one little girl you had a worship band, like 10, 12 people up there doing worship. And this little girl comes stand next to her dad while he's playing the guitar, and everybody's, someone's got to do something. And I go, no way, you know, let that happen. You know, this is church. We're supposed to be into this kind of stuff. So anyway, most people value the authenticity that comes along with informality. You know, if you're real and it shows, then people like that. If you're too plastic and put on, then it doesn't work. An informal atmosphere generates tolerance for those who are learning to serve. You know, when people are learning anything, they learn it by making mistakes. How did you learn to walk? By falling down. And then, you know, by holding on to furniture and slowly moving around, and then you step out from the furniture and you fall down again, you know. And then you learn to talk the same way. You made these random sounds, and one day you said something that sounded like da, and your dad went nuts. Did you hear that? You just called me dad. Isn't that wonderful? You know, or it was and the mom's going, listen to brilliant young child I got. But you learn to do things. Can I say it this way? You learn to do things stupidly. And people learn to serve the Lord kind of stupidly. And in a smaller church, that happens. And see, here's the deal. If you think back to those numbers I put up there is a reason that there's so many small churches. And it is that in the kingdom of God, not the politics of a church denomination, but in the kingdom of God, God values stuff like informality and love and tolerance of mistakes and those kind of things. Those are kingdom values. Churchianity values are that we do everything polished and everything perfect and everything wonderful, and we gather a lot of money and we can build big buildings and do things like that. Kingdom values are like, the church is like a weed that springs up in places that the people there don't even want it, but it's there anyway. I always like to tell this one story. There was a girl, I call her Bulletin Girl, because the truth is I can't remember her name. Do you remember her name? Well, I'm old, so that's one thing that you gotta know. And the second thing is that this happened about 37 years ago, so it's a little hard for me to remember her name. But she was not mentally complete, okay? She had problems, very, very slow. And she was about 40 years old, and I was probably about 35 years old at the time. And her mother would take her to McDonald's and buy her a Coke and French fries and a milkshake and bring her to the church every Friday. And she would have her lunch, and then she would fold all the bulletins for the weekend for our church. We had church on Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday morning church on Friday night, because that's what you do instead of building a building. When somebody taught me that I could hold Sunday morning service on Friday night, we had just turned an old bowling alley that we got for almost nothing into a really nice building. And when the insurance people came out, they said it's worth $2 million. And I'm sitting in this class, and this guy says, oh, we did church on Friday night, on Saturday night, and Sunday morning. And we'd already outgrown, and we decided we're going to do church on Sunday morning church on Friday night. And as I'm driving down the freeway, I thought, that guy just gave me $2 million. Because I get to use a $2 million building one more time. The last church that I was pastoring, we were doing 7 Sunday morning services every weekend. I would write the sermon. I would sit with about 5 guys I was discipling, but there would be 3 of us preaching, and we would cover 7 services every Sunday morning. Why waste money on bricks and mortar when you can spend it doing mission work someplace else? What? Making sense? So people from our church, I'll get to the girl in a minute. While I was still in the big church, this young woman went to Kenya to an orphanage. And I thought, that's kind of stupid, really, because Kenya is completely the other side of the world from Hawaii. So let somebody from Europe go to Kenya. We go to Japan. We go to Korea. We're doing stuff in China illegally. Asia's close by for us. So Kenya's like nuts. Let's not do that. Well, she comes back and she gets all worked up, and she wants to have a team go to Kenya and build a greenhouse so that they can grow vegetables for this orphanage. And it's not a greenhouse where you put like plastic so that it stays hot. It stays too hot there. It's a greenhouse where you want to put that shade cloth up so it's cooler. So there's a guy in the church he's a handyman, builder guy, and he designs this thing with plastic pipe and just cement blocks, and then you buy this nursery cloth, and it's real cheap. And so they go over there and they build one, but they connect with this church. And then they go back the next year and they're going to help the church build a building. And I'm still against it, but I'm handing off to the younger generation, and they're all for it. And so I figure, well, it's a mistake, but you guys got to make mistakes on your own, and so I might as well be here and help you out. After you well, they go back down there and they find out that these very poor people in a place called Kisumu in Kenya in the country have built 2 more greenhouses on their own. All of a sudden it's like, whoa, this isn't like the rich Americans go down and dump money into some place. These people are doing their own stuff. They got an initiative. So we started sending teams now, and now that group that was going there came to our new church when we got started. And so now we have 2 eye doctors who go down there, and this thing just kind of has grown up. I've never gone there, so I haven't come and done this. The people from my church go down there to help do eye exams, and the last time they were there 2 years ago, last year they went and built something, but 2 years ago they did 2,000 some eye exams, and 800 people prayed to receive the Lord. They taught the pastor how to do mini church, which I'm going to talk to you about tomorrow. He now has 20 some odd mini churches going, and he's planted 4 churches. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's to me, that's the ministry. So I'm talking to you about, you could hold church on Friday night and Saturday night and Sunday night and do it all in the same service, and people are only allowed to come one time, and you don't have to dump a bunch of money into a building. And you could spend the money in Kenya, or you could spend the money in some war-torn country. You could do things you never dreamt of doing. There are some of you that, by virtue of the color of your skin, can go places in this world and be welcome where I would get killed. Make sense? We got to get away from this whole colonial thing that the world's tried to get rid of a long time ago, but the church is still full of it. It's wrong. It's just completely wrong. To me, the Nigerian church is doing phenomenal things. Not just one church in Nigeria, but I read some statistics recently that said, France, they're all freaking out about they're going to lose their culture to Muslims, especially Muslims from North African countries. And the guy had hard data that for every 2 Muslims that come from Africa into France, there's 3 Christians. It tells me that God still cares about France. And French people don't send missionaries to the world anymore, but African people do. And I think that's incredibly wonderful. That God would care enough about my country that one church in Nigeria would have sent, and this was 5 years ago, it's probably more right now, would have sent 150 missionaries. And the guy's driving a taxi cab. And he told me, when I came here, I had to drive the cab 7 nights a week just to feed my family. And he goes, our church has grown large enough now. He goes, we're renting from this other church. We'd meet on Sunday night, and we'd rent from them. And as we kept growing, they kept raising the rent. Finally, they raised the rent high enough, we were able to go and rent the 2nd story of an office building. And it's not an expensive building, but they're doing incredible things. And there's 150 of them, and that's a really, really good thing. And so you can be a small church. When we were a church of 35 people, we started sending people from California into Tijuana, Mexico. We started a church in Skid Row in Los Angeles. And in Los Angeles, you can meet outdoors all year long. And so they'd set up chairs, and then somebody got really, really smart, and instead of all the people from our church going in there and doing all the ministry, they got the people from our church that got started, instead of recruiting more, they started to recruit the people who are drug addicts and alcoholics and whatever, transsexuals, in Skid Row to be the ushers, to lead on the worship band, and people started to change because somebody believed in them. These are the kind of things that you can do, and you don't have to be very big to do it. It's pretty easy. We were doing a thing in Honolulu from the big church I was pastoring, and we were going into this place called Ala Park, and it's just people who are dead drunk all the time. And so we went around, and one year this guy I knew this really rich man, and he liked to flaunt that he was rich, and I didn't like him very well, to be honest. And he liked me. He was one of these guys that kind of, no, it's kind of like, it's a trophy to own the pastor. So he would want to take us out to lunch every Sunday, and if I get to choose where we eat, we're going to McDonald's. I mean, that's just it. And he would take me places where the lunch would cost over $100 for 4 people, but that was like 12, 15 years ago. And so he gets this bright idea, we're going to go to Ala Park on Christmas, and we're going to give away money to people. And so my wife and I started thinking, don't go down there and give away money to people, they're just going to buy alcohol. And so we went to Burger King, and we bought these $5 gift cards from Burger King. And so we go around, and then he shows up. It was just the 4 of us, his wife and him, and my wife and me. And he shows up with nothing. And he's worth $200 million. And he's got nothing. And I went out and bought $200 worth of $5 things, And so we go, and to his credit, we met a guy on the way there who was coming to the park. He'd just gotten out of jail. His wife was living with another man on Maui. We live on Oahu. He was supposed to fly over there for Christmas, and he bought a skateboard for his son and a doll for his daughter. And his wife called up and said, "You can't come. I don't want to see you." And so when we started talking to him, and he wasn't a drunk. He was living in a halfway house just out of prison, had a job, and he was thinking about killing himself. And my friend helped him get a better job, and that was to his credit. But he didn't bring any money to give away. So we go around the park, and we've given these things out to everybody. And actually some of those people resented us for doing it, because it's like, you rich white people look down on us kind of thing. But there's this one guy, he's an African-American guy, he was really skinny. He's probably we have a real problem in Hawaii with what they call crystal meth, ice. And so he probably was an ice addict, because he was so skinny. Either that or he had AIDS. And he was so happy that we gave him what we gave him. But he goes, wait here. And he goes running off under a bush, and he pulls out 2 rotting pineapples. And we grow pineapples on our island, but these ones he pulled them out of a dumpster, and they're so overripe that they're dripping juice. And he gave them to us to thank us, and it was like, that was one of the nicest things I've ever received in my whole life. So then I go around the park, and at the very end, I got 4 of these coupons left. And there's this black guy and a white woman zonked out, probably heroin or something, but they're just blasted out. And I tried to shake the guy, wake him up, couldn't do it. So I just took the things and I stuck them in his backpack. I unzipped it and I stuck them in there, trying to make sure that nobody thinks I'm stealing from him. So then the next year, the same rich guy, gets this idea, and this is, I don't even know why I do this. He tells me that I'm going to organize a bunch of people, we're all going to go to Ala Park, only this time we're going to take blankets and stuff that people can use. And so we did, and it was a really cool trip, because one of the women in our church, Hawaiian lady, had been a prostitute in Ala Park almost her whole life. And I remember when she first came to our church, she was like 80 years old and just wrinkled and shriveled up and whatever. And she accepted the Lord. And I met her and we had a really good talk, and I'm thinking, it's really good that she found the Lord just before she dies. And then about 4 or 5 weeks later, on a Friday night service, I see her younger sister in church. And she looks just like her, except for she's young. And she's not bad looking either. And I mean, she looks like she's been about 65 years old, but you look and you go, she must have been a pretty good looking young woman at one time. And so I go up and I go, oh, you know, you're Cookie's sister. And she goes, no, I'm Cookie. The Lord had changed her so much. Well, that is not the end of the story. I like to tell stories. Can you tell? A few weeks later, I did actually really see Cookie's sister. And so I go up to tell her the story about how stupid I was that I thought Cookie was her sister. And so I tell her, you're not going to believe this. And then I tell her the story. And then she goes, I'm Cookie. She was younger than me. I was only about maybe 52 at the time. And actually, she was my age. She's exactly my age. And it just transformed before our eyes. She got off of drugs. She got the whole thing. But we go back to Olive Park, where she had been a hooker for almost all her life. And there's the neighbors. And she knows them all. And she's able to tell these people about Jesus in ways we never could. There's one woman, and we'd brought food and everything, and she was giving food out, and there's this one woman who wouldn't talk to her. She's in a wheelchair, she had diabetes, she had both of her legs cut off, and Cookie goes up, and they had been enemies. And Cookie goes up and tries to apologize and give her something. And she asked somebody to wheel her away. That was a sad thing. But I got a pillow. Now, we all got blankets, we got towels, we got shirts, stuff like that. I got a pillow. So there's these guys sitting around, and there's this one black guy who's wearing a shirt like this, and he's wearing like Dockers, you know, those tan pants, and he looks really well dressed. And he's sitting there with these obvious people that live in Olive Park. And I go up and I try to give them my pillow, and one of the guys goes, what do you think we're going to do with a pillow? we got to hide our stuff. You go, look around you. These people steal everything that you own. You got to hide everything in order to survive. You go, I don't need a stupid pillow. And so I walk away feeling stupid and white. And the Holy Spirit speaks to me and says, go ask that guy what he's doing in the park. The well-dressed guy. So I go ask him, I go, you know, it's going to seem strange, but you don't look like you belong here. What are you doing here? And he goes, oh, I don't belong here. He goes, but I live here. And I go, well, what's that mean? He goes, sit down, I'll tell you about it. And so he tells me that he's been going to the Skid Row mission over here, and he found Jesus. And that the city is actually trying to move the mission out because they want to clean the neighborhood up. That's so bad. But anyhow, he found Jesus, and he goes, so I hang out here every day, but I keep my stuff about 2 miles away from here because these people will rob you blind. And he goes, and I take a shower in another park, and they, at the mission, they helped me get a job. And you know what they did? You guys can do this so easy. The mission people said, you can use my phone number and you can use my address on a job application. Because if you don't have an address and a phone number, nobody's going to hire you. McDonald's won't touch you. But all you need is the magical numbers. You know, I logged onto the internet in this hotel and it wouldn't accept my American phone number, but it took his. And he didn't know it till just now. I didn't use his name, but I used his phone number. Okay, so you go to some place where people are living on the streets, and you make a friend with them, and you tell them if you go for a job interview, then they can call me, and I'll tell them you're a good person, and I'll tell you, and you can go back there and get the job. And he goes, somebody did that for me. And he goes, so I've almost saved enough money to go back home to Georgia, where I grew up in the United States. And he goes, so I don't belong here at all. And then it gets kind of angry. And he goes, you people you got this all wrong. This is really, what you're doing isn't very smart. And I go, well, what do you mean? And he goes, I just told you this happened to me. He goes, that's what these people need. They need a friend. And he goes, you're down here trying to do your little Christmas thing and feel like good Christians and all that. And he goes, that's not what they need. And he goes, and they don't need another blanket that they're going to throw away in 3 days after it gets dirty, or another shirt that they're going to throw away. Because he goes, there's people like you doing this all the time. And he goes, here's what you need to do. You need to come to this park every Sunday. You got church on Sunday morning? Oh, yeah. He goes, well, then come down here and have a picnic and hold a church service in the park. And invite these people to come and feed them. And then he goes, and then let them use your address and your phone number. And some of them will get out of here. Yeah. And so we talked some more. And so I told him about how we got into doing this because of this Chris guy who got us down here. And I go, I was down here last year, and we were giving away these Burger King things. And he goes, you were, huh? I go, yeah. And he goes, do you remember over there? And he pointed clear across the park. He goes, there was a black guy and a white girl laying there sleeping. He goes, did you put some of those things in the guy's backpack? And I go, yeah. He goes, that was me. That was me. And he goes, thank you for doing that, but it really didn't mean very much. What helped me was those guys over here that gave me their phone number. So you could pastor a church of 30 people, and you could invade some neighborhood where people don't have any hope, and you could make friends, and then you could do whatever the Lord leads you to do from there. Am I making sense? The Bulletin Girl. This woman would come to church. I mean, she did this for like 5 years. I don't know. When I left, she was still doing it. And she would come to church and fold the bulletins, and then she would come to all of our services on the weekend. And it's the same message, reruns, but she wasn't very smart. And in fact, she wasn't very smart at all. But one time I was preaching, and in the middle of my sermon, she's sitting in the front row where she always sits. She goes, Pastor, can I ask for help? And so I just stopped the service. I go, yeah, you can. What do you need? She goes, my cat is sick. Would you pray for my cat? And look at you guys. You're all going, some lady just goes, oh. But you know what? That's exactly what the congregation did when I said, yeah, we'll pray for your cat. And I got her to come up and put my arm around her. And I had the whole congregation put their hands out like this, and we prayed for her cat. And you know what? I'm here to tell you that I know some mega church pastors. They would get the ushers to drag her out of the service for her. And that's wrong and ungodly. But small churches tend to be able to do stuff like this instinctively. You got to work at it, and you get bigger. Making sense? Yes, sir. Turn and talk to each other again. 2, 3 things that you heard that had some significance.